This is going to be another session of what we're calling forbidden knowledge. Have you ever heard the term smoke screen? In World War I, Navy ships were sometimes told by their captain to make smoke. And what would happen is they'd put extra oil somewhere in the engine system. It would create very heavy black smoke. It would come up through the smokestacks and it would surround the ship, and if the ship was traveling, it would leave a trail of black, thick, oily smoke. And if you made enough smoke, you could create a huge fog bank of smoke. And then the enemy ships might not see you at all because you were hiding behind a smoke screen. Smoke screen is also used when we're talking about creating a scenario where people are not going to be able to figure out what's going on. A huge smoke screen. The example we're going to give you is what happens to humans who are born and have no memories of what they were before they were born, and really don't start making memories until they become at least a few years old. My earliest memories, I don't even know what they are. They're very scant and scarce. I remember one time going to the doctor's office. But before that time, apparently I was seen by doctors, but I can't remember too much. I have one very small, a few seconds memory of eating ice cream in one building, a house, a rental house. And perhaps that was just after my tonsils had been cut out. I don't remember going into the hospital to have my tonsils removed. I don't remember being in an operating room, and I don't remember, being wheeled out. But I do remember being in this house, and very scanty memories, and then later on being told, oh, well, you had your tonsils out, and then we fed you ice cream. Is it true? Maybe I was under heavy anesthetic. But anyways, over the years, I went to primary school, and I learned numbers, and I learned letters, and then I learned how to read. School went year after year, and you got whatever the curriculum said you would get in each grade level. I was talking about smoke screens. So it seems like you have a smoke screen that happens when you're born, and you don't remember what happened before that. Some people say, well, it's because your mind is not created until, you have a physical brain, and the physical brain creates the mind. It's a very simple and elegant solution to this problem. And it also means that when you're dead, when your brain dies, your mind dies too, which is the end of you. The only weird thing that ever happened to me was one time I had a strange experience where my consciousness shot up out of my head, and I was sitting next to a tree, and it felt like I was merging with a tree. And after that, I came to the conclusion that I'm not this body. It's like consciousness is a separate thing from this body, and I was 100% sure of it at the time. Later on, someone explained these kind of things as, well, somehow your brain gets its wires crossed and incorrect information happens about, where you are. Your brain makes a mistake and says that you're, up out of your head. It's just a brain mistake. It's not true. And no one really believes the stories about various, maybe the Tibetans might say that your soul or your spirit doesn't join with a small embryo cells until 42 days after conception. No one's going to believe in 42 days. Why 42 days? But, some of these other stories come about. And then there's the weird things about child prodigies, children that can play the piano at, I don't know, a very young age, under 5 years of age, and they are experts at it. And some people say, well, this is evidence that, this person has got access to memories of past lives when they were a great pianist. Some people say, well, there's various stories that people say about children in past lives, and as if it's evidence or not. And I don't know. There's some people that say that if you're hypnotized, you can be regressed to past lives. Is any of it evidence? I don't know, but we're going back to smokescreen. And, let's assume that, I don't know what you want to assume, you're just given this information from previous generations who were given this information from previous generations, and it was all a bunch of so-called scientists that came up with all this information that you're taught in textbooks at school, about biology being cells and organelles and nucleus and chromosomes and DNA and thymidine. Gregor Mendel. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you're told. Electron transport chains and Krebs cycles. And then we remember one experiment where we had some raw meat and we dipped it into a solution of, it was a catalyst. It was a biological catalyst, and the meat went all foamy, it went all foamy, and it seemed like the meat was being eaten. We were told that this was enzymes at work breaking down meat. It certainly looked like that. So this was biology, and it was all physical things other than the electron transport chain. The electrons were passed from tiny physical molecules to tiny physical molecules, things like adenosine triphosphate. And in chemistry, we learned how to do electrochemistry. If you knew the numbers that were associated with the different elements, you could calculate what was going to happen. A long time ago, I can't remember how to do it now, but I do remember that doing the numbers, they did work out, according to what they said they would work out to be. And then we were given physics, and a small part of physics was called quantum physics, and you were shown these double slit experiments that showed that light was both particles and waves. And no one could really understand these double slit experiments. They make you go, I've got to scratch my head, and I can't figure this out. This doesn't make any sense. And even the scientists of those days, when they were doing those scientific experiments, kept scratching their head, and it's like, this doesn't make any logical sense, and yet this is repeatable. We can repeat these experiments, and we didn't actually do those experiments in our physics lab. We watched it on a film. That's what they called films in those days. Films. But, we were given this basic education out of high school, and I took biology at university, and chemistry and physics. We didn't learn anything more about quantum physics and physics. We learned about moments of inertia. And in chemistry, we had chemistry labs where we did science fun experiments, and at one point we made a plastic, putting the right chemicals together, and you could put in a glass rod into a beaker full of this stuff and pull it out, and a long string of plastic would come out. We did other kinds of science fun experiments. But we never linked the chemistry and the biology. I mean, this was physical chemistry or organic chemistry. But we never did quantum chemistry, and we never did quantum biology. So they never really tied in quantum physics with biology and chemistry. But, as time went on, we learned that there were certain drugs that would help you if you were sick. If you had a certain kind of infection, you could take an antibiotic, which originally started with penicillin, which was perhaps some kind of a fungus that stopped these microbes from growing. And there was a vast industry that made pharmaceuticals, and best of our knowledge, these pharmaceuticals were either made from plant material or they were made synthetically using chemistry to substitute for the plant material. Anyways, that had been long before we were born. This stuff was all invented, and they were still doing massive amounts of research, and we didn't really know too much about the research. But that's what we were told, and if you went to the doctor, he would prescribe you a certain antibiotic or some other thing. We were told we had an immune system that was designed to fight off viruses and antibiotics. Why do we have the system? Well, God gave it to us, or evolution gave it to us if you were more scientific. And apparently sometimes it worked, but pretty much human immune systems are shitty, and they pretty much don't work. That's basically what our conclusion is. Because, anytime you scraped your arm or something, you were told you had to maybe get some polysporin or some other over-the-counter antibiotic to put on it. And you had to make sure it was well scrubbed to get the dirt out of it. No one really explained how animals survived, because they weren't, unless they were farm animals, in which case they were given antibiotics. But, regular animals weren't able to come to the vet. Your local blue jay or seagull wasn't allowed to come to the vet, just fly in and say, veterinarian, can you check me out?